And so that's what this is intended for. Now, as soon as we got this done, the next question, pastor's like, okay, what do you have for ladies? I mean, come on. It's like, okay. And so what we did, because we're not training pastors, ladies to be pastors, is my wife took this with several other ladies around the country that are all pretty serious and theologically astute, and they went through the becoming a biblical leader, because all the elder qualifications don't actually apply to women, not all of them. And they just adapted it for the Titus 2 qualifications. You'll see some of the theological quotes, or the quotes from theologians, emphasize the importance of women ministering in the context of the church. Some of the questions as it relates to how you serve in the church will be specifically geared to the role of women in the church and the importance. And you guys, I mean, how often did Jesus have women working alongside with him and traveling? A bunch. And it's not uncommon for some of the division in church to start with women. I'm not saying it's always. I'm just saying that's not uncommon, okay? But how well are we actually instructing our women to understand the priority of Scripture, the priority of theology, knowing the things that are important? Because when we're dealing with the things that are really, really important, we're less inclined to get squabbling over the things that are not near so important. But that takes training. It takes training. And I'll be honest with you, ladies, is this is when we go places and put stuff out, you know the book that goes fastest. It's this one, because it's hard to find resources to train women in biblical knowledge and theology and their proper biblical role in that context. And so that's what this is for. And if some of you ladies said, man, I'd like to talk to a lady that's been doing this, like my wife does this with people around the country. She always had doing it with 4 or 5 ladies, and she would gladly talk to you how she would do it, ideas that she's had. I would be happy to give you her phone number. She would be okay with that too, by the way, just so you know. But that's what this is about. And this just helps train, I mean, this will help dads be better dads. You know, when I talk to dads and say, really, truly, if your son asks you why you believe the Trinity, you can't answer. I mean, you think about that, right? I mean, that teaches a big, big lesson. But if we're not providing ways for them to learn those things, then it's hard. And so what we've found in churches all over is that it's amazing how many people will get involved and do the hard work of this study because there's a clear path that helps them to truly learn and defend. It's a true path. So that's what those are about. And then the becoming a biblical elder. So if you take somebody through, you know this, but just to be clear, you obviously need to know somebody really, really well before you consider them as an elder. Okay, really well. And just because somebody came from another church and they were an elder in another church, what do you think the odds are that they were trained in the other church? No. So don't make assumptions that could be catastrophic. All right, but as you know them, and as they demonstrate a seriousness to the Scriptures and a love for people and faithful service in the church, one of the things that you need to know is if they're able to teach. And people, there's been ink spilt all over on what does it mean to be able to teach. And so I'm going to tell you at least one fundamental thing that has to be. They better know their theology. Because it's not about how entertaining they are, how applicable they are. It's about the fact that they know their Scripture well enough that they can defend sound doctrine and refute those who contradict. Now, beyond that, they obviously have to be able to communicate it in a way that it's understandable. You know, I remember a guy, he said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm able to teach, but I only do it one-on-one. I said, that guy's not qualified. Because the whole idea is if a threat comes into the church, your elders, regardless of which one it is, when they hear it, will stand up in front of anybody and confront error and protect sound doctrine. And so when we talk eldership, understand that 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 are not the only passages on eldership. For instance, is courage essential? Absolutely, it's essential. Acts 20, savage wolves are going to come in, and they're going to, even in your own midst. And I tell young guys going into ministry, listen to me. If you're not willing to bleed, get out. Right? Because we're there to protect the flock. And how many of you gone through hard times in the church? Boy, howdy, right? It can get brutal. But we're there to protect the flock. A lot of people think, well, that's time to leave. No, that's time to stay. That's time to stay. And so we need people to understand how serious it is. And so you got to know this guy. But at the point you know that, and we're working on a manual called Becoming a Biblical Teacher. Okay, so that could go between these. It'll be a weekly study to help a guy who's never had the opportunity to learn how to study. The challenge for us in writing that is that we need it to be used universally. All of our stuff is in Spanish. The Biblical Leader is being launched in Berlin next month in a ministry there, and it's being translated in Albanian, Bulgarian, Croatian, and I mean a bunch. We have a man in South Africa who's on our staff who does our international, but the needs are everywhere. But the biblical teacher one, see, we can't just say use Logos because they're not going to have Logos in most language groups. And so we're writing it in a way that it will be able to be used more universally, but we expect to have that launched in a few months. But being able to teach is going to be a big deal because you want to know that before you start getting into this. Now, when I say able to teach, they may not know as much theology as they need to know, but what they know, they have to be able to communicate well, and this is going to take them deeper in an understanding of their theology. This manual deals with the role, responsibility, accountability, authority of eldership. It deals with all aspects from the shepherding of God's people, from the dealing with the difficult issues, from how do you have unity, what does it look like to have humility on an elder board, what do you do when there's a difference? You know, you may have heard, or maybe this is what you believe, if you have a statement in your constitution or bylaws that says, our elders always make unanimous decisions. I would say to you that if that's the only statement you have, that violates plurality. Because the whole idea of plurality is not that one man controls the board. I dissent, therefore you can't. The idea is that the plurality come together to make a decision. Now, I think you can be unanimous. I think you have to have a process on how to get to being unanimous. So if you have a dissenter, you want to listen to them because they may be right. You want to study the scriptures, you want to pray, you want to have a good process. This manual talks about that. But at the end of the day, if the elders are still saying, one dissenter, and they're saying, no, we believe this is the way we need to go, that man has to be willing to yield his vote and support the decision publicly and in private, right? And so this manual helps them to understand the value of unity. And you guys, I tell you, when as I travel around the country and meet with churches, the number of people that could care less about the unity of the church is absolutely sickening. They're willing to divide the church for selfish, sinful purposes. And we want our leaders to understand that unity, you read John 17, the high priestly prayer, unity is important to the heart of God. And we need to be so very careful. So this manual walks through carefully and it goes through the elder qualifications, now much more pointed, right? Because this guy is potentially going to become an elder. So it walks through those. It has the same Bible knowledge, but more. So if they do this, they got a head start. But instead, go ahead.
On the teaching one, is that going to be for both men and women, or still focused at just men?
It should be able to be used for both is what I expect. Now, I'm the final editor on it. So as I look at it, if I see things that maybe might not cross over both ways, I'll have to think about that. So I'm glad you said that, because that'll help us to make sure we think through that as we're working on it. So on the Bible knowledge, it has the same outlines, themes, key chapters, but this also has key verses, key people, key dates. So it has more. On the systematic theology, instead of one question per chapter, there's 3 to 5 questions per chapter. Instead of one theological quote per question, 3 to 5 theological quotes. And why is that? We're wanting the men who are going to become elders to have a better grasp, right, of theology and get a good sound perspective of why these theological issues are so very important. And so this one it's a 12-month program, and again, it's designed to meet once a month. I personally, one-on-one is how I do it. And if you have multiple elders already on your team, then you might have one elder do 1 month, one elder do another month with them, another, and then rotate back through so all the elders get to know them and make sure things are going well. But this is a book. And while it's 12 months, you guys, as far as I'm concerned, I would say with the Bible knowledge, again, you have to be careful. Depends on that person. You know, Jake, my son, I mean, he's in the church. One of his elders, like 90 years old. Would I ask him to memorize a bunch of stuff? Oh, my, no. He's a godly man and served well. And with existing elders, sometimes you want to take them through and help them to do what they can, to help them be as good a leaders, because you really want your elders on board, right? And you want all of your elders to be able to help train elders. But it means that it helps if they would do as much as they are able to be able to make an impact in the church. If it was me, when I'm done with this is me, my opinion. Before I would have a man be an elder, I would have him pass it's somewhat like an ordination exam. Just in this sense, you don't have to call it an ordination exam, but you can call it whatever you want. But I would have them either before the existing elders, and some people do it before the church. They have that man come up and they ask him the theological questions, and he defends them. In the churches that do that in front of their congregation, I'm telling you, the congregation's going, wow. Because we'd never put a guy in front to do that unless he was really ready. And if it takes 2 years, take 2 years. Take whatever time it needs. You know, we're not trying to limit you to how to use them. We're just trying to provide tools and at least a guideline for it. But when the church knows how well your elders are equipped, it's a pretty amazing thing. There's a couple other books to share with you. There's one called Considering Eldership. Have you ever had somebody come up to you and say, hey, what's it take to be an elder in this church? What do you think they usually are anticipating? You know, well, it depends. A lot of guys, they're just, I've been in the church a long time. I give faithfully, but how do you get to be an elder here? Well, it's hard to explain eldership in a conversation because there's so much to it. And so this is a shorter booklet, but it's a fill in the blank. It goes over, again, the qualifications. It goes over the responsibilities, the accountability, the authority, and the seriousness of the task. And truthfully, if you hand this to a guy, most guys will never fill this out and bring it back. What I say is, listen, hand this to them, tell them, fill it out. When you're done, bring it back. Give me 2 or 3 weeks to review it, and then we can get together and talk. You're not going to review it with everybody you hand this to because they're going to start and they're going to go, not what I was thinking, okay? Because it really emphasizes the seriousness of the role. On the other hand, it's conceivable that somebody take this and fill it out and bring it back, and you look at it and go, they're pretty serious. And that might start them down another track that ultimately might go to something like becoming a biblical elder. Who knows? But that's what this is for. I don't know if you guys have perpetual elders. That is, they're maybe on 3-year rotation, or perpetual means they continue to be elders until they choose to step down or pass away or whatever the Lord has. But for most guys who become elders, they do a serious self-evaluation when they first become an elder, and typically never have another time where they are called to do another serious self-examination. And if a pastor writes an examination for his elders, it's always possible somebody thinks they're being targeted. Yeah, we know how this works sometimes. So we wrote one for you, an elder self-evaluation. And the thought is this, that especially if you have perpetual elders, if every couple, 3 years, if you take this and just hand them out to the guy, say, let's all fill this out. It's much briefer, but again, it's a review of qualifications, responsibility, accountability, authority, all of those things, but it also is a warning of danger signs. Danger signs. And so it's a way to try to keep short accounts and not have somebody on that elder board forever and just have them then go off the rails. without any awareness, because, and it may not stop everything, but at least it's a way to try. And so that's what the elder self-evaluation is. We have 2 booklets, Pastoral Training in the Church. I'm going to actually talk about one of the chapters in here tonight. And all it is a reminder, it's the church's responsibility. I tell guys, okay, if you have a choice, you can either be trained in the church or you can be trained in seminary, but you can't do both. Which is the more biblical option? It's a church. Now, if you can do them both, is that great? Well, that can be great. That can be a huge benefit, all right? But we get it backwards. And as long as you're trained in the seminary, then they're good. Church doesn't need to do it, and that's not true. That's just not true. And so all it is, and honestly, if you read it, it's so simple, right? I tell people this was almost embarrassing to write, because you don't have to parse any Greek words or anything as far as Christ's pattern and what he's told us to do. It's just pretty simple. The one on missions, why does church need to train missionaries? The church in America is awful. Missions is worse. Missions is in big, big trouble because churches are not training missionaries. And so it's just a reminder to that. When it comes to internships, we provide both pastoral and missions internships. Now, the way the internships work is like if you wanted to do an internship, and Excel Ministries, we provide a structure for an internship if you want it, okay? All we're trying to do is help provide a pattern, because it's hard to design that, and how do you accomplish what you need to accomplish, okay? So you say, I've got a young guy, and he's interested in pastoral ministry. I've taken him through some of these other things, and boy, I believe God's calling him to ministry. Well, if we were to partner, all of this is under the authority of your church. We'll just help you so that when you're done, you've met a standard that will be very helpful for the guy. And so, let's suppose he could only do an internship, but he couldn't do seminary. It's 2 years. There's going to be books to read, papers to write. It's all going to be turned into you guys. You're going to review it. Then it uploads to our system, and we have a man that reads every assignment of every intern. We have them in the United States. We have them in India and South Africa. And he reads everything. And he just builds a file. We build a file. And we have a teaching evaluation. So every time he teaches, you or one of you guys can evaluate him and talk to him and then upload that. We have a quarterly evaluation. How's he doing his personal life, family life, shepherding, teaching, administration? Once a quarter. What's the reminder? It's automated. And so that goes into his file, and it helps him. And so he's growing. And then you're practicing his Bible knowledge, or you're having somebody practice with him. You're practicing his systematic theology, because you guys, at the end of the internship, you don't cram to pass an ordination exam. That's awful. The theology is your lifeblood. You need to know it. And so the whole time you have people practicing with him. We've had guys who worked with youth. They'd had the youth group quiz them, and they keep practicing so that they're really learning well their theology. They're answering about 70 systematic theology questions over the 2 years. So I don't have the ordination booklet, but the ordination booklet is online. And it goes beyond the becoming a biblical elder. Okay, the Bible knowledge goes beyond, the systematic theology goes beyond, and then halfway through, one of us will come out and say, we're going to do a mock candidating with the guy. Well, what's that? Well, you're going to get some of your people, and there's going to be a search committee. We're going to help with it, and he's going to interview for a job, and we're going to ask him questions like a search committee, and then he's going to ask us questions, and they better be good. I just talked to a pastor, and he said, I was interviewing a guy. The only question the guy asked me when I opened the door was, how much am I going to get paid? That's a good way to avoid a job. Anyways, because we want to help them learn how to answer questions, and philosophically, where do you stand on the issue of whether it's homeschool or public school or kind of music, all of those things that affect music or affect ministry. And so we do that practice, and then he's got the rest of his internship to think through the things. At the end of it, one of us comes out, and then we do an ordination exam. And it's all the stuff that's in the ordination booklet. So it's all defined. And we just participate with the elders of the church. And then it's always up to the church. If they're going to ordain or not ordain, that's up to them. We don't do that. We just help with the structure and the completion of the internship. We also have them that marry to seminary. They're usually 30 to 36 months because we try to marry it more to the schedule of the seminary. So, and on the theology questions, we might say answer 2 systematic theology questions, because if they're in a class on pneumatology, they just will answer those. We're trying to make it as easy as we can on them if they're in seminary. But also part of the any internship, if you have a new members class, we want them to watch, and then we want them to teach it and be evaluated. Okay? If you go on visitation, you have a crisis, we want them to go. We want them to experience. If you have staff meeting or elder meetings, we want you to have them come in and watch and see at least appropriate parts of them. The idea is you're checking off all of these. If you're going to do a wedding, they may not be able to do that, but if they could walk alongside of you and watch what you do and watch how you counsel a young couple, and a funeral. If you're going to do a funeral, have them walk with you and show them. You know, for most guys, when they do a funeral, it's the first one ever. They're calling saying, hey, how do I do this? You know, what's the proper etiquette for a funeral? And so you're showing them all of those practical aspects. And again, if they're in seminary, it just marries to that schedule. So we try to make it as reasonable as we can as far as the workload, but they have to do the same Bible knowledge, systematic theology, memorize it the same way. In missions, I'm almost done. In missions, it's a 2-year internship. They can do seminary, but we don't have a missions internship that we marry to seminary, because with this one, when we marry it to seminary, we take out all the books and stuff like that, because they're going to get that in seminary. In missions, if they go to seminary, they're not going to get all of the books and the reading and the assignments on missiology in seminary that they're going to get in here. So we're not going to take any of that out. And so it's a 2-year internship. Ladies can do our internship for missions. We would say if they're going to an unreached language group, that lady is going to be one of 2 or 3 ladies that will know that language of those people, and she's going to be the one teaching those ladies. So we want her to learn her theology. We're not going to put her through an ordination exam, put her through a written exam, because we do want to make clear distinctions. Or if a single gal is going to go on a team to an unreached language group, and obviously the church has to have a mature lady that can help participate in the discipleship of that lady who's going to go to ministry. But we want her to be well equipped. We don't want to exempt her because she's a lady. She's going to go out to missions. We want to prepare her well. There you go. Questions? Sir? How's that? Absolutely not. No, that'd be awful. Okay. So Excel Ministries, we started back in 1992, so we've been going a long time, but for most of those years, like I was in full-time pastoral ministry, so we only worked with like 3 or 4 churches just doing the training that we do. 5 years ago, I went full-time and decided I didn't know if the churches would be responsive. Church has not always been responsive to this kind of training. And I determined that I was going to give a shot and see if we could help churches if they would be openness. So I did that. Initially, it was just me, and I had a part-time gal that was working with me, that's worked with me at church for 30 years. And it was only in a few months I was absolutely overwhelmed. I was just overwhelmed, and the ministry has just grown faster than we expected. There's 5 of us that are full-time men that work with Excel Ministries. My goal has been to train guys and get it better established so that when I can't do it anymore, the ministry carries on. We have a bunch of part-time and then tons of volunteers. Yeah, everything. I know it, but if you get it, see, it's going to help you. Yeah, you just got to work on it. It's a little added dimension to learning the theology. Yep. Yeah, questions? About this or training in general, whatever. Okay, and I'm not the Mr. Answer Man, just so you know. I mean, I'll do the best I can, but if I can't do it, there's a bunch of pastors in this room that will help me out. I'm confident. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So we have a church and there's not an environment, like we're not readily identifying men, or we don't think there's an environment for that to happen. How do we begin to cultivate that in the church?
Yeah, you know, and I get that question a lot, so thanks for asking that. So I appreciate it, Ryan. Because I hear that a lot, where people say, wow, we don't really have any guys like that. And it's like, well, have you ever presented an opportunity for them to say, hey, we're looking for guys that want to really be serious about the word. And if you go through this training, these are the things that are going to be accomplished. And this is what you're going to benefit at the end of the day. You guys, honestly, the churches that I've gone to, the response has been pretty favorable. To me, at the end of the day, if one guy wants to be trained, it's glorious. And if you have more than that, it's amazing. But I think oftentimes people, they just don't get a starting point. And that's what I do. A lot of what I do is I'll travel to churches. That's where I was at this last weekend. I was meeting with a men's group. I spoke 3 times, 3 hours worth on Saturday morning between 9 and noon. It's like, hang on, guys. But you know what? They got a bunch of guys that are going to go through the training. And I think a lot of times it's just the lack of opportunity for guys and the lack of encouragement and what it's going to be. And I think it is hard if it's just kind of nebulous. Well, we'll read a book. Well, and this is like, no, listen, guys, if you go through this, you're going to be able to lead your kiddos better. Moms, dads, either way, it's going to help you immensely. And this is what you're going to be able to do. And the response to that has been really, in my exposure, has been really, really favorable. Just so you guys know, Ryan's got some guys going through it, but Kyle, raise your hand, Kyle, is an XL intern at Ryan's church. So if you want talk to a guy that's going through it, and there you go. The guys I've worked with, you guys, when I started ministry, 2 of the guys in the first youth group I was youth pastor. I had the privilege to train them, and one worked side by side with me, one's on my board, right? I mean, you guys, I was their youth pastor 45 years ago, and we serve in ministry today. And it's not youth pastor to kid anymore. When I lost my wife died, when my wife passed away, they're shepherding me through that. They knew me as good as anybody. Better, probably, right? So it's pretty sweet when you do that. Other questions? Yes, Ben. Yeah, I'm happy to give any of you my card. It has my cell phone number. I'm accessible. I'm happy to talk to anybody. They can always connect to our website by hit connect, but I'm happy to give out my phone number. And I'll have that where somebody, as long as we're like-minded, right? Because we want it to be accurate. That's the biggest thing. But we actually, as a ministry, we help cover the costs of translating for those that need it. As long as we have the resources, we're just a supported organization. And we help with the first printing. And then we tell them when you get that first printing, you guys can collect donations or whatever you want to do and then use that to reprint. We're not trying to control it. And so honestly, Ben, like for us, when I was talking to a guy in Myanmar, and he's like, well, what does it take to get permission? And it says, well, we have to say you have permission. It's being translated. I won't get all of these, okay, because we have a man in South Africa who's our international guy. But it launches in Germany, in Berlin, in May. The Biblical Leader. They just do one at a time because it's a lot. But it's being translated into Albanian and Bulgarian, Croatian, Burmese, Afrikaans, some languages in India, but you guys, I have no idea what they are. And then there's one in Malawi. I don't know what the language is, but they're working on that. But we have a man who kind of manages. Our goal is not, as a ministry, is not to get big. It's not to have tons of staff. It's not to know everything. It's just to help the church. I personally believe in the evangelical church, this is one of the biggest needs that there is. Because if we're not training as we should in the church, then ultimately you die, then whoever's left, to whatever extent you trained them, they're making the next decision. And if they're not well trained, it makes sense why the church continues to deteriorate. Yeah, Ryan.
How do you handle it if you pour all this time into someone to develop, and then maybe they will even take a church somewhere when you're hoping they would follow you up or whatever?
Yeah, well, and that's what, we were talking about that with Jed here a little bit ago. So here's the deal with training. is that you never know exactly what God's going to do with the people that you train. And as you're training them, of course, it's like, man, if this person would stay and help be an associate or whatever. And I think that's great. That often happens. Most of our graduates, we don't have to find a place for them to work. Most of them, they're hired, they're used as a church plant, or they're sent to the mission field, right? And that's good. But so if I could use myself as an example. So when I was working at Countryside down in Texas, it was a larger church. And we're constantly training. But some stayed and some left. You know, the guy that's a youth pastor there, I was his youth pastor 20 years ago. The guy who took my place as the senior associate pastor, I was his youth pastor's youth pastor. That's when you know you're coming to the end of your ministry, you know. I mean, you start talking like that. I'd known him since he was a kid, and he took over a significant role in a church of about 2,000 people. And so you just don't know. And when I was talking to Jed, because we were talking about the same thing, it's like, you know, the thing is you're going to train them, and then the Lord's going to use them to, you know, really double your church, right? Because they're going to go take another church. And then all of a sudden one's going to stay, and it's like, oh, maybe this may be the guy that's going to take my place. Is I either move to another ministry or we work together here for who knows how many years. At Countryside, and it's a larger church, almost every one of the staff there, we trained there. And you know what? They're still there. Probably the lightest is 10 years. Nothing for them to be there 20 years. And I'm talking in all different arenas of ministry. Why? Well, they wanted to be there in the first place. They loved the church. They liked living there. Their family was there. I mean, church knew them. They knew the church. And so that relationship is so precious when you do that. And sweet to be able to have then that longevity. And it really minimizes a lot of the potential conflict you can get into with staff situations. Especially you bring somebody in that you've known for a couple of weekends, and, you know, it's like you hope for the best. Pretty risky. Sir?
So you've mentioned a couple times in the previous talk, I think it was about Elder Joe goes off the rails and perhaps some of you bring into the eldership training program and later on regret that you maybe not. How often, maybe how do you see taking away or coordination? Says may not can't sound someone quickly,
Mm-hmm.
but there's times where someone does really go off the rails, they no longer
Mm-hmm.
agree with what they said they agreed with formation of practice.
Yeah.
And so are you seeing that happening at all, or is that unheard of?
Would you say, am I seeing people that... Yeah, most would not even call it officially ordination as much as just an ordination exam or pointing them to eldership. But have I seen people removed from eldership? Yes. Disciplined out of eldership. And here's the reality, you guys. Judas walked with Jesus, but he was Judas. And no matter how well you do, ultimately only God knows what happens in a man's life. And we can only do the best we can as far as training, but the truth is, God ultimately will accomplish purposes, even in difficult people, even sinful people, right? And even in the church. And I think that's a hard thing for us to you know, in other words, a guy splits the church. I was just at a church that happened, okay? And I split the church. It was awful, but ultimately God's going to accomplish his purposes because no unbeliever will ever thwart God's plan. Now, he may make it different than what we expected to have, but God's doing exactly what he intends to do. And he'll use unbelievers to do it, and he'll use believers to do it, right? And I think that's where we take hope. But as far as removing somebody from eldership, whether you call it ordination or not, I think that, sadly, that does happen. We do our best to train and equip, but you don't always know what's going on in a person's heart. You just don't always know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it would be the same in church discipline. It's 1 Timothy 5 as it relates to elders. The scriptures make it clear that if an elder persists in sin, is unrepentant, then you put him out. When you say reconciliation, of course, but does that mean back on the elder board? Not necessarily. I mean, that would depend a lot on exactly what happened and et cetera, because, I mean, the primary qualification that is over all of the qualifications is above reproach. And so, you can restore a man to the church that may not be to the same position of leadership. Any others?
In presenting this to current elders that are there, and maybe the books reference it, but, and, asking your current elders to, participate, what type of time commitment in just the curriculum, and hopefully there's other personal investment with the individual, but with the curriculum, what type of time commitment on a monthly basis are you, on average, asking your elders to commit to?
Yeah. Part of it depends on the Bible knowledge as far as how much. I think you just got to be careful with the Bible knowledge. That's not where I'm going to emphasize everything. It's more on the systematic theology. And if we're talking about the becoming a biblical elder, knowing that there's like 3 to 5 systematic theology questions per. So if I was doing it with existing elders, I would probably spread it out and not do one a month, maybe do one every 2 months, and then practice on 3 questions and practice on 2 questions. Then the thing is, you want to maybe to get together, pair up outside of your meeting and just practice answering them. Just get used to practice answering the systematic theology questions. I mean, honestly, Jed, to answer the questions, certainly it's not going to take more than probably 30 minutes per question because the quotes are all right there. The challenge is getting to where you can shut your book and just walk through. And for me, when I work with somebody, I want to help them on an easy path that helps them to think through the issue, to make it. So I wouldn't make them memorize all the verses, just get some quotes. And frankly, for some of them, if they need to put the first verse they're going to memorize and then chain it in their Bible, I'm okay with that. I just want to help them so that they know how to think through the answers well. But I just think we have to be gentle with those guys. They're doing a lot of work, and at the same time, we want them to step it up. So I would just be, I think as far as time a month, if you did 2 hours a week, it would be easy to answer the questions. It's just grasping them. I think you could do all the questions easily. But the key is getting used to practice, because the only way to do that is say them. Because we don't talk the same way we write. And so we write them down. When you write them down, and then you say, okay, shut that and just talk to me. Just talk to me. Just answer. I'm your kid, and I ask you, why do you believe this? It takes a while to get used to doing that. At first you feel like you're stumbling all over yourself, and it's like, oh, this is so awkward. It's like we're all awkward. That's the way it is. But the more we do it, you do it once, it's hard. You do it 5 times, you're starting to get comfortable. You do it 10 or 15 times, you're going, I think I got this. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Experience pushback when pastor or the teaching senior pastor ever takes this to his other elders, pastors, and says, hey, I want to do this, and guys say no.
I can't imagine that happening. Yeah. Yeah, and you just have to be careful. Now, where that's dangerous is when a man on your elder board says no, and he doesn't want anybody else to do it either. That's a problem. Okay? I get it if a man says, it's just too much, it's overwhelming, and so he pushes back and maybe gets a little defensive. And when I travel, that on occasion that'll happen. But what I would say then is you say, listen, not everybody has to, but for those that would be able to at this time of their life, I'd like to do it with some of you, and you try not to embarrass or make awkward, but at the same time, you don't want to just say, well, I guess we can't train now because one guy doesn't want to do it. That's not a good idea. And so I would be as respectful, as gentle as I could be, But I would seek, because you want some guys that are going to be trained in it, and you want to train your new guys in it. And so you just got to try to. Now, there on occasion is a guy that he just doesn't want trained, but he's sinfully rebellious. But that's a whole nother issue. And that's not, we might see that in relationship to this, but usually we get that call not when they're doing this, but before they do this, as they're trying to clean up the elder board because they got problems and they need help. Yes.
When they bring people in to train this eldership, we have a discipleship pathway to just get people into the culture of the church. But taking this to that next level of eldership, number one, DC churches maybe just create a monetary buy-in for that person, just to go, hey, it's going to cost, I went through your website, but it's going to cost $50, we're going to go through X, Y, and Z these books.
Yeah.
DC churches do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the way we work is we want the church to know we want to help the church. We're not trying to live off the church. We're not trying to take advantage. That's why we're a donation only. We're very careful about that. But most churches would say that when they get the resources, they ask their participants to contribute towards the resources because they just want them to be committed to it. It's not, I mean, these, I think, our cost is what shows on the website.
They're about $20.
Yeah, 15.
And that monetary buy-in, like, oftentimes people get it free, they lose it, they're like, oh, I'll just grab it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah.
But when you throw that to them, it's like, there's a little bit more ownership.
Yeah.
Second question, like, there's a ton of good resources, and there's a lot of findings. If you were just to go, and you might have covered this, but I feel like it's so good.
It's a lot.
What would you say, man, okay, you got a guy who's interested in eldership, you take him through this, what's that next step?
Mm-hmm.
Is it this one, or the green one? I tried to grab it all the traffic.
I know. Yeah, that's great. And you need to get my card when we're done because you can call me and we can talk as well. Because you guys, when you go home and you go, what did he say about this one? Because it's a lot. It's a lot. We have videos on our website that explain them, but I'm probably faster just talking to you. And I'm fine with that, if that's helpful. So if somebody... If you're not sure about where they're at for eldership, I do the biblical leader first. But, okay, this is, and the only time I wouldn't do this is if I was really working with somebody that really had a fair amount of spiritual maturity, okay? And because this kind of lays the groundwork, and if somebody's not done this kind of hard work, this will get some of the work done for the becoming a biblical elder. It'll give them a head start. If this is the first one, I'm just telling you, it's a lot. And so that's what I would do. Now, with considering eldership as a general rule, I would just use this, mostly if a guy comes up and you don't know if they're serious about eldership or not. They're just, hey, what's it take to be an elder here? That's when I'd give this. Now, again, there might be somebody more serious that you give this to just to see, I don't know this guy enough. Then it gives him something to do, and it gives you information about him if he does it. And then the elder self-evaluation, I would only use with existing elders and do that. I mean, you could give it to them before they became an elder, but honestly, if you take them through becoming a biblical elder, you've done everything in this, plus tons more. This I would just use more as a checkup. Okay?
Have a few more minutes if people have questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. You're welcome. Our heart is just to help the church, you guys, because if the church does their work when it comes to leadership, it changes everything. Let me address one thing, and I'll take your question. You guys, one of the things that I hear from people is pastors. They'll say, "Rocky, I don't have time," and I say, "I get it. I've worked in both big and small churches, and I get that. But you guys, the truth is, when we look at the scriptures and the priority of scriptures, you have to have time. There are other things that, and I think you'll understand this. You're in ministry, okay? There are needy people in your church, that will absorb as much time as you will give them. And the enemy would love for you to give them all of your time so you can't do the priorities of ministry. You guys, when I was working down in Texas, I could counsel 10 hours a day, 5 days a week if I wanted. Okay? But if I did that, I couldn't train men. And so on my calendar, I had allotted time to work with people who had needs, and I had allotted time that was for discipling men who were going somewhere. And I didn't have the freedom in my mind to say, I'm going to take this and put it over here. And that meant for some people, when they wanted to come see me, they had to wait till next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And ironically, for those that I had to have wait 3 weeks or maybe 4, by the time we got to the 3rd or the 4th week, they called me and said, hey, we got it figured out. Man, let's do another 4-week one. Okay? Because oftentimes needy people foster habits of always expecting you to meet their needs when they have it, which facilitates the same problem. And you guys, don't get me wrong. Somebody calls, I tell people, I'd have to teach our staff, our administrative staff in the office, especially the sweet, compassionate ladies. When somebody calls and says it's a crisis, that does not mean it's a crisis. It means they want me to think it's a crisis. Okay? A crisis is when a man calls and says, Rocky, my wife laid down for a nap and I can't wake her up. I'm on my way because she's gone. That's a crisis. But you guys, people who have marriage issues, those are often a life of crisis. And I'm not saying we don't help them. And I'm not saying we're not compassionate to them. I'm saying if you will let those kind of things absorb hour after hour, you won't train. And then you'll always be overwhelmed because you don't have help. But you don't have help because you don't train. But you don't train because you're doing all of this other stuff and not managing the time well to accomplish the priorities of God. And when we talk about Christ, we'll just walk through his life tonight. And you guys, there's nothing mysterious. You're not going to go, oh, wow, I never saw that. We're just going to be reminded of what he did and how he did it because he was anticipating the next generation, right? And it's important to think like that. Otherwise, you're going to be overwhelmed your whole life. But when you start training guys and they start helping, it's like, this is great, right?
Well, when I heard Kyle was in the internship, I was kind of mopey for a few days because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Have you ever started guys at different stages, or do you run through one and then pick up the next?
I'll start them at different stages. You just have to be careful you don't get overwhelmed. But yeah, I'll start them at different stages. But you guys, the thing is, when people start hearing that you would train me to be a pastor, you would train me to be a missionary. The pastor would spend that kind of time with me. The elders would spend that kind of time with me and literally invest the 2 to 3 years to really make sure I was well, and would give me the opportunities in the church where they could evaluate me so that one day the elders of the church could lay their hands on me and affirm my giftedness, my qualifications, my training. You guys, I'm telling you, that means a lot to people. It just means a lot. And at the end of the day, that's part of fulfilling the Great Commission, right? The Great Commission goes all the way to teach them all that I've commanded you, which means you're equipping the saints for the work of service. That means you're training people to be pastors, missionaries, and that means that you're sending people out, and that means the world's being changed. But churches, why does it get so boring? All you do is come in Sunday and go out Sunday, hear somebody talk. And it's like training is different. We need the preaching, don't get me wrong. It's a priority. But we got to have the training. goes with it. Y'all been great. Thanks for asking nice questions too, Ben. No, so great question. So I was a youth pastor for 25 years, and I trained a lot of kids that came through the youth group to become pastors and missionaries. Okay, because that's where you could identify them. You know, the person who says, hey, just put whoever, that guy's really dynamic, put him in the youth, that's crazy. Put him in there because he loves God and can truly teach them God's word, right? We agree on that, right? Because they are they're at such a time of decision making. I mean, not to be unkind, but when you're talking to a group of people that are like 50 and above, they're probably not going to make a lot of life changes about, let's go to the mission field now. Some may. But when you talk to young people, they're setting their whole course of life. And so I'm glad you asked. So for me, if I had some high school or college young men that were serious about the Lord, I'd take them through becoming a biblical leader. And I'd tell them, I want you to memorize it all. We're going to practice because you're at a time of life when you can really do this well. What I would do next, for those who are really serious guys, I mean, you really feel like, they're demonstrating for their age, maturity and a true love for the Lord, I would take them through becoming a biblical elder. Now you're going, really? No, they're not going to become an elder anytime soon. Could be decades. But we are so backwards. We wait till we need an elder before we train, which is crazy. We ought to always be training. And then we have to find somebody old enough to become an elder. And then we got to train them because nobody's ever trained them theologically at a time when they probably don't memorize as well as they used to and study as well as they used to. But if you took young guys through and you really taught them what biblical eldership looked like, the sacrifice, you started teaching them. You need to start shepherding people best you can in your stage of life. You need to learn this Bible knowledge. You could learn all of this systematic theology so that you're teaching them what they need to know so that when they're mature enough and potentially gifted to become an elder, they're ready to go. You're not now saying, we got to equip this guy. So if we would train our young guys so that starts filling up the churches with young men and young ladies, but I'm thinking leadership primarily, eldership, that kind of thing. If we would start training them at a more serious level, and you and I both know there are kids that'll do it and would be excited to do it. And then it may be down the road, if they start really demonstrating giftedness for potential ministry, is when I would consider an internship. I just want them to have enough maturity that it would be reasonable for them to consider such an opportunity. That's what I'd do. It's a great way to train them. Hey, can you imagine a young man getting married, having gone through this? And being serious about this, really serious about it, there's no reason we can't do that. There are young people that will do that. It'd probably be easier to get young people to do it, some older people to do it. Okay? Thanks for that question. Yeah, Ryan had just one.
On elder qualifications, how prepared do you want to see somebody before you start them in the internship or even in the becoming a biblical elder? For example, I have a young man that says he wants to do ministry, but he says he struggles with pornography, and I told him the internship isn't an option for you while that struggle is there for us, because I don't want him to go.
Thank you. Ephesians 5, in our culture that says that just happens and men just they have those struggles. Okay, that really starts to make me mad. All right? Because when you come to Christ, you're delivered. Now, I'm not saying the temptation's not there. I'm saying the victory is there. You're no longer in bondage. And the Apostle Paul says, these things ought not even to be named among you as is proper among saints. That's what it says. So let's start telling people the truth and say, your problem is not a weakness. Your problem is a rebellion. Okay? Because God makes it, and you want to talk about it, I can talk about it. Biblical meditation. See, I call biblical meditation the lost discipline of the Christian life. Biblical meditation is how you train your mind and control your mind. It's not complicated. And so thanks for asking that. And I would say absolutely not unless there's clear victory. Last thing we need is a pastor that's pastoring and having trouble with pornography. Really? I mean, I understand Paul said he struggled with sin, right? But you guys, he's the same one that said, don't let these things be named. I think the Apostle Paul, I mean, how many of you guys thought, I thought when I got older that sin wouldn't be such a struggle. That was wrong. What happens is I see sin, things that are sinful that I never saw as sinful. Oh, that attitude. Oh, that response. Oh, that thought. It's not delving into the garbage, immoral yuck of the world. It's that we just realize that, man, sin's just pervasive, And I mean, that attitude, that just unsettled, there's all of that we continue to battle. But this whole issue with pastors and pornography and stuff is awful. And they need to put it to death. And again, just can I say one quick thing and I'll be done? We need to finish. You guys, when it comes to controlling the mind, guys say that I can't control my mind. It just keeps coming. Here's the deal, real quick. If you have a sinful thought, and the first thing you do is say, God, forgive me, and then you pull a verse into your mind, for God so loved the world, and you say, for God so loved the world. How did he love the world? You begin to process how he loved the world and start thinking about the different ways. You're forcing your mind to concentrate. Now, if you tell somebody, just read your Bible, you can be reading your Bible and thinking these awful thoughts. You cannot meditate and do the same thing. For God so loved it, he gave his only begotten son, and can you imagine what would it have been like? Would I have ever given my son for my enemies, people that I knew? And you're working through this verse, and as long as you do that, your mind cannot be thinking about anything else. Okay? Yes. And so you get into that habit. You don't have to memorize verses relate to the sin. You learn to meditate. And then pretty soon you're going on and then another sinful thought. And you do the exact same thing. Same verse, different verse. Another comes along, you do it again. A guy came in my office. I must have been tempted 1,000 times. I'm like, perfect. As long as every single time you set your mind on the Word of God, you know how the Bible says meditate day and night? People think that's impossible. You know what? If you set your mind on Scripture, every time you're tempted to think wrong, you'll meditate day and night. There you go. So the very temptation destroyed you will help to make you think right. Okay? Focus on the Scripture. Sorry, I'm done.
All right, we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll just convene back here at